Good morning, everyone. It is a couple minutes after 11. Just to be mindful and thoughtful about everybody's time commitments, we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. We might have others hopping on and joining in a few minutes, but I want to go ahead and get started so we make sure we have great time for conversation. Welcome to the Connect, Engage, Transform webinar series hosted by UNC Rural and the Carolina Center for Public Service. My name is Meredith Bazemore, and I'm the director for UNC Rural. This is the last of 4 webinars that we rescheduled based on a spring ice storm. Welcome to North Carolina spring weather. And all of these webinars have been focused on rural partnerships in a pandemic. We want to highlight and encourage authentic, effective, and sustainable collaborations for the public good as part of this series. As UNC-Chapel Hill and communities throughout rural North Carolina have adapted to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic during a year that also showcased ongoing racial injustice in a controversial election, we seek to highlight ways that university community partnerships have evolved through this time. For those of you who may have joined us at last year's conference, you'll remember last January, we hosted an in-person conference for the first time at the Friday Center. It was our UNC Rural unit was brand new at the time, and we were really excited to have over 260 attendees for that conference. Last year's conference was also focused on university community partnerships across rural North Carolina. We were delighted to receive a lot of positive feedback from that experience and had hoped in 2021 to again do that in person. But as we all recognize, the pandemic threw a wrench in all the plans. So here we are with our webinar series, and we've decided to go with this platform to keep conversations going, to check in with some of the same partnerships we highlighted as part of the CET conference and how they have adapted during this time of the pandemic. I am really pleased to announce today's moderator for the session. Her name is Margaret Barrett. Margaret is from a rural county herself, Harnett County, and brings a public health and crisis intervention background to today's session. Before joining Carolina Center for Public Service in 2018, she spent 18 years working for nonprofits, first as an executive director for the Orange County Rape Crisis Center in Chapel Hill, and then with IPAS, an international organization focused on reproductive health and rights. Margaret has a BA in political science and a JD from Carolina. At CCPS, she has partnered with UNC Rural on several initiatives, including the January 2020 CET Rural Community Partnerships Conference. Margaret, thanks for leading today's session, Community Supports for Farmer Stress in a Pandemic. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Meredith, for that introduction. I want to welcome everyone to this session, Community Supports for Farmer Stress in the Pandemic. As Meredith mentioned, we had this conference back in January 2020 that helped lead us to this year host this series of webinars. At that conference, I was fortunate to be in a breakout session called Farmer to Farmer, Developing Peer Support for North Carolina Farm Families for Rural Resiliency and Suicide Prevention. And I think for those in the room at that time, that served as an introduction for many of us. I remember the room being just tightly packed and standing room only and really hot. And that was a time that we didn't think of as pre-pandemic at that point. So now we'll always look back to January 2020 as that pre-COVID time for us. And there was just this sense that a lot of people in the room really wanted to know more about the issues that y'all on the panel are going to be talking about today, and that there was really a hunger for learning more and figuring out how we could be supportive. So at this point, we would like for folks who are here with us to share in the chat where you're from, maybe what county you're from and who you are, so that we can get a sense of who's in the room. I suspect we'll still have some other people joining us because we had a lot of folks register, but if folks want to just pop a note in the chat to say where you're from. And now I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our panelists for today. And I'm going to introduce all of them, and then we'll kind of pass the torch after that. So first, we're going to hear from Patrick Tang. Patrick is a program manager at Peers for Progress in the Gilling School of Global Public Health at UNC. He collaborates with researchers and practice-oriented staff to develop sustainable, effective, high-quality peer support programs. His projects have utilized various modes of program delivery, including in-person, one-on-one, in-person groups, online groups, telephone, and text. So Patrick, welcome. Look forward to hearing from you soon. After Patrick, we're going to hear from Robin Tudor Markham and Samantha Liu. And first, Robin is director of the North Carolina Agri-Medicine Institute. She grew up working on her family's farm in Orange County, North Carolina, and is proud to be the mother of an Eastern North Carolina farmer. Robin has education and work experience in occupational therapy, public health, and agricultural and extension education. Her particular areas of interest are in recognition and management of farm stress, prevention of agricultural-related respiratory conditions, and promoting safe and healthy agricultural work and living environments. Robin is known best for her ability to build and maintain collaborative partnerships along the continuum from local to international levels. So Robin, we're so pleased to have you here with us today. Samantha Liu is an MPH and is the Associate Director of the UNC-Chapel Hill Peer Support Corps at Peers for Progress in the Gilling School of Global Public Health at UNC-Chapel Hill. Samantha promotes and facilitates peer support and cross-campus collaboration as a means to influence the culture around mental health. She has previously worked to promote peer support in public health practice. Samantha, thanks so much for being with us here today. Once we hear from Patrick and then Robin and Samantha, we'll move into a reflection session that'll be led by Robin along with Russ Vollmer, who is a farmer involved with Peers for Progress. And we're very excited to welcome Russ, who joins us from the Vollmer Farm, which is a 5th-generation working family farm located in Bunn, North Carolina. And I was exploring the Vollmer Farm's website earlier, and so I encourage everybody to do that sometime after this session. It would be a treat for any of us to visit there at some point. So then we will probably have enough, we should have plenty of time to go into some breakout rooms. So just wanted to give people a heads up that we are going to want to go into breakout rooms after the presenters and get to talk with each other and generate some questions for the presenters. So once again, big thank you for all the presenters who are here and all of our participants. And with no further ado, unless I'm missing something, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch to Patrick.
All right, thank you, Margaret. Let me get this up and running. Can everyone see that all right? Okay, great. Well, thank you for that introduction, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. It seems like the cold spell is over, spring is in the air, and we're all looking forward to that. And I know farms are getting busy as well. So we're here today just to talk to you, give you guys an update on where we are with the Farmer to Farmer program, talk to you about some of the things that have happened in the past year related to COVID stress on farmers and how the program has developed in that time, and talk to you about the future of the program and what we would like to see moving forward. It seems like a lot of folks joining here today have a farming or background. I will admit, my family does not come from a farming background. I grew up in the burbs in the north, so I'm not even a North Carolina native. But I do have a cousin who studies agricultural science, and so we'll see. He's out in Wyoming looking for a job right now. But again, Peers for Progress, we're the experts in peer support and community health workers for, diabetes, for mental health, a variety of kind of complex health challenges. And, we are not the experts in, say, like rural health or any specific topic areas where we're kind of, we come in with the model and kind of our experience with best practices in peer support. So today I'll just kind of open us up, and then I'll really put the spotlight on our partners at North Carolina Agri-Medicine Institute and Russ, who is one of the peer farmers in the program. So again, these are the presenters for today. And we won't be presenting in this order. We'll kind of skip around a little bit as we move through the presentation. So we'll start off with a little bit of introduction on how this program came about as a refresher for maybe some folks that didn't participate in the live session last year. Then we'll talk about what we've done so far in the Farmer to Farmer program, the timeline, where we are now. And then I think people are going to really love hearing from Russ about his reflections and his experiences. And I think we'll have a breakout session after that. And then afterwards, we'll come back and Robin's going to talk to us all about some other community sports for farmers during COVID. Farmer to Farmer is just one initiative amongst the repertoire programs at NC Agri-Medicine Institute. And then we'll finish off with some of our goals and looking ahead for 2021. So this is our the beautiful poster that came out of last year's session. Just wanted to share that with folks. And I'll hand it over for this slide to Robin, who can tell us a little bit more about NC Agri-Medicine Institute and what they're all about.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you all for joining us today. We're always very appreciative of the opportunity to tell the story of the North Carolina Agri-Medicine Institute, but more so to be a voice for the farmers, farm workers, fishermen, and foresters that we serve. The Institute actually is in its 21st year. In 1999, the UNC Board of Governors formally sanctioned it as a formal partnership among ECU, NC State, and North Carolina A&T. And the reason for that configuration is because of our strengths in medicine, allied health, and nursing here at ECU, and then the strengths in agriculture and cooperative extension at North Carolina State and North Carolina A&T, our state's two land grant institutions. I'm happy to say that our partnership is stronger than ever. We have faculty and students across the three campuses, as well as partners across all 100 counties of North Carolina, the United States, and several other countries. The Institute is not regulatory, and we do not engage in advocacy. We are actually forbidden from doing any advocacy by the UNC Board of Governors. So in our mission to promote the health and safety of our agricultural populations, we do that through three main streams: research, prevention, intervention, and education outreach. And I would invite you to take a look at our website, ncagromedicine.org, to learn more about our programs and our partnerships. Okay, Pat, I think we're ready for Samantha.
All right, thank you, Robin. And as a little bit of background, the effort here from Peers for Progress has been a tag team effort with myself and Samantha. Samantha was there for at the start of this partnership. She did a lot of the early work on doing the formative evaluation, developing the program plan, and setting the stage for a lot of the implementation that came afterwards. So I'm going to hand it over to her to talk about how this partnership with NC Agri-Medicine came about, and kind of her thoughts from that phase of the program. Samantha?
Thanks, Pat. And thank you all for joining us today. In the beginning, I just wanted to share with you all how this collaboration came to be. It was a little bit serendipitous. You see the screenshot on the right-hand side there from the WRAL news story that I just happened to see from a contact of mine. And upon watching it, really realized that it was echoing a lot of really similar situations that we had come across in some of the research that we had done with Peers for Progress, with vulnerable populations, but also populations of people who had a really strong identification with their occupation and who had sometimes a harder time talking about stress with people who were not of that population themselves. So we saw parallels in our work, and I thought, well, maybe we can be helpful here. So that prompted me to reach out to Robin and started the beginning of a wonderful collaboration, and has really been rewarding for me. We came to this and really have been building upon this collaboration from a strengths-based collaboration approach, and thinking that, as Pat said, we as Peers for Progress have a lot of expertise and knowledge and experience with peer support, not only in research, but also in implementation and practice, and thinking about ways to tailor the approach appropriately for the context in which we're working. And then Robin and her team, the Institute and her staff, just brings a wealth of knowledge and connection to the farming community in ways that, as Pat said, we just cannot, not being farmers ourselves. And we totally acknowledge that. And I think it's been great because we both, the Institute and Peers for Progress, come at it with that lens, realizing that we both have strengths in different areas, but that they are complementary to each other. The beginnings of this drew again on that idea that Peers for Progress doesn't hold that agriculture expertise. And so my beginnings of the formative evaluation that Pat was referencing was really delightful. Over a dozen interviews with farmers and farm supporting organizations to really ask them, what do you want out of a program? What does peer support look like for you all? What could it look like? And to really talk to them about the things that they wanted out of this work, and then taking that information, and in the beginnings, starting to think about what that program structure could look like and how best it could be helpful to serve the people that we were hoping that it would serve. And in the beginnings, I believe that last year during the January 2020 conference, that was the poster that Pat showed a couple slides ago. I was part of that presentation team, and that was right after we had just finished those interviews, and we were starting to really pull together and synthesize that information to bring it towards the program that Pat will tell you a little bit more about later. But yeah, that's how it started. And I think for you all as attendees to this talk, as you move forward, just keep in mind that it is a lot of complementary expertise that we were looking at here between the two groups. Pat?
Thanks, Samantha. I do want to bring up, since you touched on the point of the agriculture as an occupation having its very strong culture. We several years ago have had a good relationship and partnership with Rutgers University Behavioral Healthcare, and they have a massive call center that serves the state of New Jersey, and actually they field calls from outside of New Jersey as well. But they have a variety of programs that are, they're not based on a diagnosis or a health problem. They're more focused on common identities of occupation. So, and also just, life identities. So one of their oldest programs is Cop to Cop, which is for law enforcement officers. They have Vet to Vet for veterans. They have Caregiver to Caregiver, and they have Mom to Mom, just to name a few. So, we came in to help them do some evaluations. They had been doing this program for decades before we came in. Yeah, it was really a great learning experience for both of us. And I think that's, oftentimes when we partner with with community groups and people that because we don't have our own program, other people have the program. We don't have the connections to recruit peers. Oftentimes, we don't have the networks to recruit participants. But yeah, we're always glad to see the results of when we come in and are able to help others. So let's step back just for a quick minute and talk about peer support and how we're defining it so that we're all on the same page. In this program and in a lot of our work recently, we think of peer support as social support that people provide kind of like friends with additional skills. That's how we approach it really. In a lot of programs are not training folks to be paraprofessionals. We're not training them to do psychotherapy or anything like that. We're just giving them a set of skills and giving them some resources so that they can help other people in their community. And for when we're looking at who might be a good peer supporter, we're looking for natural helpers with some training who can help others with their health and simple problem solving, resource finding, things like that. The reason peer support is important is because people trust peers because of their shared life experiences. So whatever that source of identity is, whether it's sharing a clinical problem, whether it's being part of the same community, whether it's a stage of life, these are all important to how we view ourselves. And these identities change through time. As we know, farming communities face really high rates of mental health needs, but they often don't have as good of access to those resources. And sometimes when they do, those resources aren't necessarily culturally appropriate. So folks who don't understand the agricultural lifestyle. And we know that farmers are maybe more likely to talk to another farmer than they are to seek a mental health counselor or talk to their doctors about some stress that's happening in their lives. So the goal of the peer support program here is to first alleviate individual stress, just to be a person that farmers can talk to, and then long-term to kind of foster some changes in social norms about mental health and also complementing existing behavioral healthcare services. We don't see peer support as the solution to the mental health crisis in rural communities, just as peer support is very important in the addiction community, but we don't talk about peer support as the solution to addiction. One thing we know is that peer support has been, there's some evidence that it's helpful in rural communities. There are very good projects around community health workers working with migrant health workers. There are some farmer peer support programs in other states, but we don't have that in North Carolina. And I think our philosophy for this program is that we're starting out small, even though we're looking to cover all 100 counties in North Carolina with peer farmers. But as a start, I think just having a peer support program available and having it up and running is important. And even if we're able to help one farmer, one family, one farm, I think looking back, we're going to see that as a success of the program. So some of the potential impacts that we see from this program, first of all, it's mainly designed to address mental health issues. So alleviating stress, depression, preventing suicide, importantly, but also improving physical health outcomes. So helping folks be more alert when they're at work, reducing accidents and improving worksite safety, things like that. Improving relationships that might be, stressed by outside stressors like financial stressors, climate concerns, legal, interpersonal issues. And then also, importantly, addressing economic impacts. I think one of the long-term goals is to keep farmers, on their farms and contributing to the North Carolina economy. So this is our program timeline. We started out back in late 2019 with a lot of Samantha's work, which went through the summer of last year, which was made difficult by a lot of the uncertainties with COVID, but the program still was able to move forward with recruitment, and we were able to train the first cohort of peer farmers in the fall of 2020, and NC Agri-Med just began training their second cohort in the first few months of 2021. And recruitment of peer farmer has begun. There's advertisements for the program that have been disseminated across their networks, and matching of farmers to the peers has begun, and we're looking forward to kind of those first contacts happening and hearing from the peer farmers what's going on. So currently there are 10 peer farmers. The goal is to hit 50, so roughly one peer farmer per every 2 counties, and looking to have them kind of geographically spread out, and also coming from a variety of agricultural kind of backgrounds. Our training curriculum is a 10-hour training curriculum. A lot of that all of it was delivered through Zoom online. Some of them through live sessions, and some of them having the peer farmers listen to recorded training sessions. And then on top of that, there's also training in mental health first aid and Talk Saves Lives. There's a couple of other points here about how the farmers were recruited. And for the participants, the method of getting them connected to the program is they request support by contacting the Institute. They could be referred by somebody else. And then there's a supervisor who kind of talks to them, does a brief evaluation, and then matches them up with a peer farmer in the program. Right now, the communication is via telephone, but we're hoping that after COVID is over, that there might be opportunities for in-person meetings and other types of connections. So this is a map of the coverage right now. So as you'll see, the 10 farmers represent 10 different counties all across North Carolina, and we're hoping to improve on this even further. So Robin, I'll shoot it over to you to talk about some of the impacts of COVID-19 on kind of the development of the program and what you saw happen this year or in the past year.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So COVID was both unkind, and I will also say kind in some ways to our program, because I think our program has done as well as it could to be in a virtual world. And like many of the things that you all have had to do or have encountered during this past year, you know that there are a lot of things that we would like to do face to face that we have just not been able to do. And all of these were essential to the successful development of Farmer to Farmer. So when we are in I will say normal times, our staff spends all of our time in person, either with a farmer on their farm, at a cooperative extension office, at a farm bureau meeting, at a commodity annual meeting like the North Carolina Strawberry Association annual meeting, or the North Carolina Agritourism Networking annual meeting. So our schedules actually are about, I would say, 95% dependent on our partnerships with those other ag-related organizations. And it gives us an opportunity not only to be in person with our farmers, but also to earn something that I call trust currency. You know, even though myself and all of our staff are from farm families, you still need, when you're going into a new group of farmers that you haven't worked with before, to have that introduction and that trust relationship. And so we were very much looking forward to being able to use those activities that we do for our other programs and that trust currency to introduce this new program. We were able to modify that, and so information on farmer to farmer for both recruitment of peer farmers and for letting other farmers know about the program who might like to have a peer farmer have still been made through those groups. So whether it's been a virtual annual commodity meeting, it's been a COVID education session, or any other type of opportunity virtually, we've included farmer to farmer in every one of those that we have done for the past year, as well as doing a mailing to every cooperative extension office, and there are 101 of those, every soil and water office, and every farm services agency. And the Farm Services Agency, or FSA, is the office that farmers have to go to make sure that their crops are certified with the U.S. Department of Agriculture for things like crop insurance in the event of a disaster. So in addition to those things, there has also been word of mouth about the program from folks who have already joined us. But an interesting thing happened here in this virtual world, that we actually have a Doctor of Nursing Practice student that took my Fundamentals of Agri-Medicine course last summer and just became intrigued in farm stress and the many things that were affecting our farmers in addition to COVID. And she developed an online screener that has 4 questions that farmers can answer. And depending on how they answer those questions, it might show that they are, have high stress, that they're depressed, or that they're very anxious. And so we were not planning on that tool becoming available, but it has become a recruitment tool for farmers who are in need of the program. I think the biggest disappointment for our 10 peer farmers has been having to do our training virtually. And the first training we did do both live sessions and recordings, but we decided that in the second group of peer farmers that we would do all the sessions live. And so I think that's been a positive improvement. And our nurses, the 2 people who receive referrals for farmers who would like to have a peer farmer are our part-time RN and our family nurse practitioner, both who are farmers. So far that's working out. Next slide, please, Pat. So these are the promotion materials that we currently are using. The one on the left is actually done in a business card size, so that if someone picks this up in a meeting, they can just slip it in their pocket and not be concerned about the stigma of someone knowing that they need help. We were asked to do this in a 9x6 counter card that is being printed this week that will be going out to agribusinesses across the state. And on the reverse side of this, it actually has the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So if a farmer is in true crisis, that there's someone that they can reach out to. On the right is the promotion for the peer farmers. And right now we have 3 men and 7 women. And so we're hoping that we will recruit some more male farmers. But so far it's working out okay because our requests for peers have come from both men and women. But we'll talk a little bit more about the end about how you may be able to help us with this. And we think this is important because we know that farming and stress is synonymous anyway, and that with weather and tariffs and all kinds of pressures, farmers were already under so much stress. But last year, the American Farm Bureau repeated a poll that it did for farmers that told us that in COVID, over 2/3 of the farmers and farm workers that participated said that COVID had affected their mental health. And of those responding, the farmers and farm workers were 10% more likely than other rural adults to have feelings of nervousness, anxiety, and being on edge. And that was about another 2/3, the same amount, 2/3. The percent of farmers and farm workers who say socialization impacts their mental health has increased by over 22% since the poll that was done in 2019. So we know that agriculture is often a very solitary work environment. So to know that people were already isolated and having feelings of being alone or isolated, and now we're having this increase from COVID, it just reiterates how important this program is. And so with that, I want to turn this over to, I think, the most important person to be with us today, and that's my friend, Russ. And I always ask Russ the same thing, to speak from the heart about his own journey and why he thinks a program like Farmer to Farmer is important, and why he chose, even after his own journey, to be a peer farmer. So Russ, it's all yours.
Thank you, Robin. It's really great to be with all of you. Make no mistake, I look at this time with you all, as well as time that I've had with Robin and with others. This is still healing time for me. This is still therapy in many ways. And as I tell my story, I think you'll kind of come to understand that a little bit. The farm and my growing up on the farm. The farm is a 5th generation family farm for 3.5 generations. It was a tobacco farm. Tobacco is what paid our bills, what sent me and my 3 sisters to school. There, obviously, if any of you have been paying attention to that industry, it has, for all intents and purposes, it has moved primarily overseas. There is still production that is taking place in North Carolina and in the United States, but the large percentage of that has moved overseas. My father and my mother kind of started seeing the handwriting on the wall And they transitioned the farm back in the 1990s, late 1990s, to a fruit and vegetable farm. And so that was really a blessing in a way, because if we go back and we look at the last 10 years of the tobacco industry in North Carolina, those farmers that waited too long to transition really were under the gun. And if you think about what it requires to grow a crop of tobacco, it's very specific type equipment. You cannot take a tobacco harvester and transition it over to harvest wheat or corn or soybeans or other, the tobacco curing bar. It's very specific type of equipment. And those farmers that did wait too long to transition started to see the value of that equipment when it floods the market go from very high value to a very low value. Okay, and so North Carolina is very unique in as much as when you have one crop that tends to dominate a particular growing area, and then over a period of time that industry very quickly leaves, that adds even more of a dynamic of stress and mental health problems that North Carolina farmers are facing. I would like to just remind everyone that's on this call that agriculture is still the #1 industry in North Carolina. That might surprise some of you. Okay, those of you that maybe did not grow up farming or just need to be reminded that it's not just the farmers, but it's the seed dealers, it's the fertilizer salesmen, it's the equipment, it's the bankers. Okay, we're all somewhat connected in this wonderful word that we call agriculture. Okay, and so back to my individual story. So there was great success early on with the transition from tobacco to fruits and vegetables on the Vollmer farm. But there was a problem. And the problem was that even with that success, the farm was not generating enough income, which would allow me and my family to come back and to be fully 100% involved in the farming operation. So out of college, I took a crop insurance job. And for 21 years, I worked in the crop insurance industry, as well as continued to work and support and help out on the Vollmer farm when I could, okay? And that involvement typically was around the agritourism part of farming. And so our farm became an area where we had a lot of school groups come. A lot of people would come on the weekends, and particularly during the fall of the year, we raised corn and did a corn maze, pumpkins, and all different types of things that we did to try to generate enough income for the family. And that in some years it was very successful, in other years it was not. But this goes to kind of an underlying problem that we have in agriculture, is that where is the success that can come from the effort and energy that we put in to doing something that we truly love to do, okay? And that problem is still in place now. As far as the overall economic upside to farming for those that choose to stay in farming, if it is generational, and also for younger farmers or for younger people that might see this industry as something that they want to get into. Okay, so that may be a discussion for another day, but it does add to the ongoing mental stress and challenges that we have with our farmers. And I would just like to just say, and just to kind of follow up what Robin said, farmer mental health has been a big issue within our state and our nation well before COVID came along. Okay, now I know that because back in 2014, I was asked to give a talk at the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association annual meeting about faith in farming. I am a believer. I have a strong personal relationship with my Lord, and people knew that. And so they asked me to give a talk about how faith relates to my particular farming operation. And in doing that, I did some research. And I learned that the CDC did a study back in 2012 where they basically put all of our occupations into 30 subgroups. And very surprisingly to me, I learned that farmers and fishermen and foresters, that was our group, lead the nation in suicide. Well, this just blew me away. Not that I had not had stresses and difficulties of my own, but to think that my own people, that this was a hemorrhaging effect of depression and stress and ultimately suicide, it floored me to the point of needing and wanting to ask more questions about this problem. Now, that being said, let's go back to what was actually taking place on the farm. And ultimately, what was happening was my farm was hemorrhaging. You know, I was in a situation where I was trying to and needing to be very, very creative about how to stave off foreclosure. This came from 3 years in a row of devastating weather-related losses to my strawberry crop, okay? And then I made a fatal error. And this is an error, and I need you all to understand this. In a farmer's mind, because we are ultimately very optimistic people, okay? You can't do this job and not be optimistic. But the fatal error that I made was I said to myself, I just need one good year to get whole. If I have one good year growing strawberries, I'll be able to make up and dig out of this debt hole that has been created due to these devastating losses, okay? Well, so what ended up happening? Year 4, another big hit. So I went from kind of being able to breathe a little bit and to move some things around with my banker to ultimately being trapped and having to make some very, very scary and very, very personally suffering type decisions for myself and for my family, okay? Which I worked through with a lot of wonderful people, Robin being one of them, and others that were there for me to kind of navigate those things to the point where it was decided through conversation with my cousin and his wife that had adjoining land that I would sell the farm to them for them to continue to run the Vollmer farm, okay, which they do, and that I actually help and assist them in doing, okay. What ended up being a lifeline for me, actually, to be able to stave off foreclosure and the shame, let's talk about that word. Shame is a very powerful motivator when it comes to farmers. and how others perceive them. But there was internal shame. Part of that was a question that I asked myself, and ones that I think farmers that are in these types of financial situations ask themselves. And this was the question: why have I failed when my ancestors were able to be successful? Okay. Again, very generational type thinking. And there are a number of answers to those questions. A few of the things that I want all of you to understand is that the farm that my father and grandfather farmed on is not the same farm that I farmed. Farming in the past and those markets that were created to support and uplift those farmers were much more regional and local. Now, farming is global, and something that could take place way on the other side of the world has a direct relationship in how farmers can be successful in today's point in time. Okay. So if we're not careful as farmers, we can blame ourselves for failure when we haven't really understood that circumstances and things that are outside of our control, which we understand that weather-related issues are outside of our control. Okay, but something in regards, and Robin talked about it as well, tariffs, trade embargoes, trade, political unrest, all different types of things impact the farmer's ability to be successful in today's point in time. Okay, so I say all that to say and lead into kind of a description of how farmers are thinking. Now, most of you may know this, but I just need to just say it. Farmers are a difficult bunch to work with. We have buckets of pride. We are independent minded. We are the last ones to want to ask for help because it shows a certain amount of weakness on our part when we go there. Okay, we don't even talk to each other about this stuff. Okay, now by the grace of God and blessings with all of you and everybody that's involved in this program, I believe, is the most effective approach as we move forward, going forward, that we have these peer-to-peer relationships. And it's part of the reason why I'm involved in this is because of my own story and my own journey along the way. And that if I had not had certain people that I felt comfortable talking with, it would have been a much more difficult transition for me exiting farming and into my new career that I have right now. Okay. The other thing that is of great difficulty, and it's just a reality, and I think it was already spoken about before, is, farmers don't have real access to a lot of mental health people in the rural area. And then on top of that, people that don't fully understand how our minds work. And let me give you an example of this. If you think about the fact that everything starts and has to go into the ground, a piece of ground, an object called land, okay? And everything comes forth from that, okay? farmers have an unhealthy love and relationship with their farms. We many times do not make rational decisions because our emotions and our hearts and everything that is a part of that gets caught up in our decision making. Let's go back to what I said. I just need one good year to get whole. Okay. I was avoiding certain realities. And until change was forced upon me, I wasn't going to make a change because I had responsibility to hold this piece of ground. Okay. And it wasn't until my wife, who did not grow up farming, and ultimately in her life growing up, through certain dysfunctions of her own family, lost everything that they had many times. And so she never grew up with a certain attachment to things. Okay. Well, farmers definitely have attachments. Okay. And it can influence our decision making, particularly when we are under certain stresses, that being physical or mental stresses or financial stresses. So I say all that to say, it's good that we're doing this. You have signed up for a heck of a challenge, okay? But the challenge and the struggle is real, okay? But we have to understand that this love for our pieces of ground, our farms, are so intense that it can create decision-making problems along the way that may not be in place with other types of industries or jobs or occupations, I would say. Okay, so I can say that I have come through this process. I still have joy in my life. Robin was the first one to say to me, you know, your story and your book is not over. Your chapter has just changed. You know, and so through a lot of personal time and then also time in talking with others, I have great joy in my life. And now my job and my occupation is Vanessa and I operate a farm to table restaurant. And so it's been very joyful for me to be able to work with the farmers on this side, to be able to buy their fruits and vegetables and their proteins, to help them sustain certain markets that they need to be successful. Okay, so that's just my story in a nutshell. And again, just a real pleasure to be with all of you, and I thank you for this work and this effort, because the struggle is real. COVID absolutely has just added, you know, additional stressors to it. But make no mistake, we were in a crisis well before COVID showed its side, or its sign here in our nation. So with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Russ. And I think you all know why we chose Russ. He is so open and so honest about his story. And one of the things that is so important for us to be able to even begin to address farm stress is to overcome the stigma and to just start the conversation. And so when we have a farmer who's willing to start the conversation, it can go so much further than anything else that we can do. And I chose this picture of Russ in the greenhouse because quite often when he was really struggling, he would call me and he would say, I'm in the greenhouse.
Hmm.
And I knew that this was his place where he spent a lot of time reflecting and thinking about what he was going to do. And it was a place of solace to get away from all of the pressures that were around him. So that's why I chose this picture, Russ, out of all the ones
And
that you sent me.
I tell you that that brings it all back, and you know, I've gotten to the point where you know, feeling those emotions like I am right now, it's good. You know, every now and then we need to be brought to tears in our emotions, and to be able to feel that, and to be able to go back and think about those conversations back then. I'm just very grateful for you, Robin.
Thank you, Russ. So if you all have questions or comments, if you will type them in the chat, and I'm going to ask maybe Pat or Samantha if they will help monitor those, and we're going to just move forward a little bit with the remainder of our presentation. So Pat, if you can go to the next slide, actually you can go ahead and move to the next one. So how soon did we know that COVID was going to affect our farms the way it has? Well, we first actually started getting a glimpse back in February of last year when we were trying to help our farms prepare for the new season and could not purchase the personal protective equipment they are required to have by the Worker Protection Standard, which is a standard that is governed by the Environmental Protection Agency for anyone who's using pesticides on their farm. And so we sent out the sort of the SOS, if you will, to the Department of Agriculture and Environmental Protection Agency and said, things are going downhill really fast for our farms and we've got to give them some attention. And so Pat, if you'll go on to the next slide. So we began as early as last February thinking about what it would be that we could do to support farms. And everyone on the farm, and I actually had a phone call from the North Carolina Farm Worker Health Program that have been colleagues of mine for over 20 years, and the North Carolina Community Health Center Association. And they said, we have information for farm workers and we don't know how to communicate with farmers. Can you help us? And so from there, every single day for the past year, except for a little bit of time at Christmas, we've been working hard to be the bridge builder, if you will, among state agencies and private nonprofits, among the farms, the farm organizations, and those other groups have been working on COVID to form some very tight, hardworking networks for grower and farm worker education and awareness, to educate people who are in policy making decisions about our state's largest industry and what the particular challenges are when you have a time-sensitive crop in the field that has to be harvested and you have farm workers living in congregate shelter and being transported in groups to and from the fields or to and from town when they need to go to the laundromat or to purchase their supplies. The logistics of working in rural counties that do not have isolation and quarantine housing has been one of our greatest challenges. Just figuring out, agriculture is a massive machine, and just figuring out how to get all the communications out to everyone who needed them in a timely fashion has been really important. Planning for our vaccine distribution has taken literally months of work. And then just trying to get personal protective equipment that was, and not taking anything away from healthcare and first responders, but our folks on farms were already using personal protective equipment that they're required by law to have. And then all of a sudden it was all diverted and they could not purchase it. So how do you get both COVID personal protective equipment and equipment that is mandated out to them? Real challenges. Next slide, please, Pat. So these are just a few of our most wonderful partners. The work that we do in agricultural health and safety has been supported by the North Carolina Tobacco Trust Fund for well over a decade now. I think we started our first project with them maybe in 2000 or 2000, I think it was around 2008. The Department of Agriculture, our awesome cooperative extension service in North Carolina, Farm Credit has been one of our very first supporters in working to address farm stress. Our commodity groups like Sweet Potato Commission and the Christmas Tree Association, our friends at the Department of Labor and North Carolina DHHS, it takes a village, and it truly takes a village, not just for farm stress, but for responding to the unique COVID needs that our farms have. And I could talk to you about those COVID needs all day. But I've had somebody 3 times now, I've had someone say to me, all right, you need to demote the things that you have on your website about farm stress, and you need to make COVID more important. And 3 times now I've said nothing is more important than farm stress, not even COVID. COVID is another stressor to the compounded stressors that are out on our farms. We hope we have a plan that we will begin to do a much better job in managing COVID, continuing to do prevention, and getting vaccine out to our farm workers. Farm stress is not going away. It is not. And we have an incredible obligation through the work we do to address that. Next slide, Pat. So our goals for 2021, Pat, next slide, are to continue the work that we're doing in raising awareness about farm stress. We're able to offer free counseling sessions to farmers, farm families, farm workers that do not have third-party insurance through our funding from the Tobacco Trust Fund. Continuing to expand farmer to farmer. Identifying providers who are from the farm. And I think we probably have about 8 or 10 now that we've identified who actually grew up on a farm, and so can understand that the advice of taking a vacation and taking a pill is not what farmers are going to be able to do to deal with stress. So identifying resources that are out there, if they're, the support groups, the web-based information, print material, whatever's out there as a resource, because we know that one size does not fit all for our farmers. And we have just received funding from the North Carolina Farm Credit and the Corn Growers Association of North Carolina to purchase the software to begin setting up our crisis and resource line for farmers. But it's going to take a lot more funding, so we're working on that now. I hope that by this time next year, we will have that crisis and resource line in place, because we've found out through COVID just how difficult many times it is for farmers not only to be able to reach out in times of crisis, but get the information they need to deal with it, whatever today's problem is. Next slide, Pat. So over the next year or two, we are going to be looking at increasing the number of trained peer farmers we have. We really have to do some work to be more representative. And we're working on a project right now with RAFI USA and some others with our socially disadvantaged, historically marginalized farmers to look at their experiences and their stress with particularly financial issues. So we want to have more farmers to take advantage of this program. We will be setting up a ongoing training for our peer farmers and debriefing sessions, because we know they're going to need a lot more support. Always looking for ways to improve our programming and to make sure that, like with our other programs here at the Institute, that farmer to farmer and our other farm stress work is integrated well into all of our programs. So Pat, I think it's back to you.
Thanks, Robin. I think this is, we want to wrap up in the next couple of minutes and give folks time for questions. I'm sure there's some out there, but you know, how can you folks help us, you know, in 2021? Definitely just we're trying to spread awareness of farmer to farmer. So if you know somebody who could benefit from the program, you know, make that referral. If you know of an organization that you could reach out to, you know, just help us promote the program in any way possible. Robin mentioned that NC Agri-Medicine, they're definitely open to students to conduct independent studies. She mentioned that one of her students was, you know, one of her interest areas just happened to align with this project, and managed to contribute that kind of assessment to the protocol. So that's, you know, looking for more opportunities like that. And they're always happy. Like they were saying, during COVID, they've been going around talking to all sorts of groups around the state. So yeah, they're happy to make an appearance and talk more about farmer to farmer, as well as their other programs to spread the word. So I think that's ways you can help. Thank you to all these groups, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We'll leave the last 15 minutes for your questions.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to give special thanks to these wonderful presenters, Patrick and Samantha, for bringing the model into a new realm with this program. Robin for the wonderful emphasis on the needs of farmers, and Russ for the power of the personal story, which means sometimes more than anything in helping us to see what's vital and important about the issues that we're focusing on. So I just want to ask everyone in the Zoom way to offer maybe some hand clapping or thumbs ups or ta-das in the reactions to thank the panelists. And because we do have a smaller group, if anyone would like to either ask a question or voice an appreciation, please feel free to jump in or raise a hand, whatever would be most helpful, but wanted to get that thanks out there. Anybody have a question you'd like to share? Do want to go ahead and give everybody a heads up that we will send a brief survey, and we'll want your feedback. This is the last session in our 4-part series, and we are soon looking forward to beginning to plan our next Connect, Engage, Transform conference, so hopefully in 2022, and we'll look forward to bringing folks back together for that. Any panel members like to share any other thoughts that you wanted to share before we go? Just checking out the chat.
I just wanted to say thanks again out loud. As someone who lost a family friend to suicide who was a tobacco farmer in North Carolina, I just think this is such an important conversation. And Russ, I wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. And Robin, thank you all for the work you're doing. It is such a vulnerable space to be and to acknowledge the need and also be vulnerable enough to ask for help when needed. So I just wanted to say thank you both for that story and your work around this conversation. So it's much appreciated.
All right, we will be sharing this, the video of this widely with folks who had signed up to get that. And so we look forward to getting word out about this. Dane and Caroline, any final logistical details that I'm forgetting?
We'll send the video link to all of you who are here as well, and you can share it with anyone you'd like to share it with.
All right, thanks everybody. I hope you have a good week, and springtime is hopefully on its way, right? So thank you, nice to meet you all.